All right. So the biggest thing we want to remember today is like serving is who we are. It's not something that we do. It's not something that, I'll serve on Sunday once a month. Like it is who we are. We are servants. And we get the best picture of this in John 13, if you want to turn there. John 13, 1 through 17. And I'm just going to read that to us because it's such a beautiful picture of who Jesus was. It says, "It was just before the Passover feast. Jesus knew that the time had come for him to leave this world and to go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he now showed them the full extent of his love. The evening meal was being prepared, and the devil had already prompted Judas Iscariot, son of Simon, to betray Jesus. Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power, and that he had come from God and was returning to God. So he got up from the meal, took off his outer clothing, and wrapped a towel around his waist. After that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that he wrapped around him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, 'Lord, you are going to wash my feet?' Jesus replied, 'You do not realize now what I am doing, but later you will understand.' 'No,' Peter said, 'you shall never wash my feet.' Jesus answered, 'Unless I wash you, you have no part of me.' 'Then, Lord,' Simon Peter replied, 'not just my feet, but my hands and my head as well.' Jesus answered, 'A person who has had a bath needs only to wash his feet. His whole body is clean. And you are clean, though not every one of you.' For he knew who was going to betray him, and that was why he said not everyone was clean. When he had finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes and returned to his place. 'Do you understand what I've done for you?' he asked them. 'You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you shall also wash one another's feet. I have set you an example that you should do as I have done for you. I tell you the truth. No servant is greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them." So, that really is it, right? That's what everything is about. Just being like Jesus. That is what we have been called to do. So how many of y'all are wearing a cross today? Maybe have a cross hanging in your house, right? Okay, so we see that. We're used to seeing a cross, and we associate that as the symbol of Jesus. And so what I want us to start considering is this image of a towel. Yes, we have the cross, and we know what that means. But what about the towel, right? The towel that Jesus took off of him, and he's washing the feet of his disciples. And if you've ever studied that culture, that was the lowest of the low things. The servants of the servants, that's who washed people's feet. The lowest you could come up with in society. No one else is going to wash somebody's feet, right? This was a really big deal for Jesus to do that. Maybe Jesus was as humble as Kevin. We're not sure. Just kidding. He totally was. So what I want us to think about is this towel. So some of you, maybe when you see a towel, you're like, nope, I don't want to clean, right? Or you see a towel and you think, yes, that means things are clean. But that is my challenge to us, is that when we see a towel, just like when we see a cross, and we think of Jesus and we think of what he did for us on the cross, that we start to see a towel and we start to think about how Jesus loved us and served us with such a deep humility. Because everything that we know that Jesus did for us, our only response to that is service, right? Because our service is a response to what Jesus did. Because Jesus was the ultimate servant. He not only washed his disciples' feet, but he washed the sins of the entire world with his blood, right? So we go from that towel to the cross, and that was what Jesus did. That is who he was. And so our desire to serve should come from our gratitude and realizing who Christ is and what he's done for us. It is not to please people. Anybody else in here a people pleaser like me? And we serve to please, right? That is not what God has called us to do. Service is not to earn salvation, right? So all of these religions and practices, and maybe, some things that you've grown up in the church doing, like, oh, well, I have to serve and do these things to get my salvation. That is not what it's about, right? This is a response to our Savior who did this for us and loved us this much. And so service builds and prepares us to have stronger character and to be able to fulfill the responsibilities that He has given us in the kingdom. It really does. The more we serve, the more it nurtures us into who God has called us to be. One of my friends had a really tough December with the loss of a child, and as we moved through things, one of the things I encouraged her to do was to get back into serving at church, right? And it seemed so weird at the time, but a few weeks ago she was like, "Thank you for doing that. Thank you for pushing us to get back into serving and to doing this hard thing, because it really is through our service that God works in our hearts so many times." And I think we fail to remember that. We are all called to serve, not just as churchgoers, right? But because our relationship with Christ should be woven into every single thing that we do in life. It is not a one-off experience. It is literally who we are. And Jesus set that example of a humble servant, right? And so to be like Jesus, we have to serve as He taught us and as He showed us, right? The whole word disciple is about apprenticing, following Jesus. And so if you're not serving, you're not following Jesus, because if you look at anywhere in the Bible, that's what He did all the time, is just following and people around and seeing, how can I help? How can I love you well? How can I see you? And so we can't neglect that. So the key to being a good servant is, to keep our eyes on Christ, not on the whims of our heart. So often if I'm encouraging somebody to go serve or do something, they're like, "Oh, I don't really like to do that," or "that doesn't really feel comfortable," or, and that's not what it's about, guys. Right? It's not about our comfort. Now, is every form of service for everyone? Absolutely not, right? There are things that you're like, yeah, I just shouldn't be doing that, and that's fine. But serving in and of itself is a call that we all have, and so we cannot neglect that. So if our eyes are focused on Jesus, that is how we will best serve Him, because if we are looking at Him and listening to what He has for us, then we are going to be obedient to where He is pointing us, and He is always going to be pointing us to service of other people, not of ourselves, not of our desires, not of any of those things. Service is all about gratitude, right? It is what Jesus has done for me. And so I need to ask the question, okay, what can I do for you, Lord? What is it that you would have for me? And so one of the things I want you to really think about, do some deep soul searching, is how much of an impact has your Christian faith had in your relationships to others and the work that you do? Would people that just are around you on a normal basis, do they know that you love the Lord because of the way that you love others, because of the way that you serve? Because the way that we live our lives is a response to what Christ has done for us, and that is really the key to living life as a Christian. Again, service does not save us, but it is the fruit of our obedience, right? It is a tangible reminder to the world of our love for the Lord. Another thing is service is learning and applying our spiritual gifts. And so there is no one-size-fits-all recipe for how a Christian should respond to this. I used to struggle because I just thought everybody should be serving the ways that I serve, right? And then I realized, well, that is wrong, right? Because if everybody was serving the ways that I serve, there would be a lot of things that were left out because my heart is for specific things. And so it's really great that God has equipped us to love and serve in different ways. And so that is all a good thing. I think there are some people, they have been called to full-time poverty alleviation. I think about our friends at the Hub. And there are 2 married couples that at the Hub that both of them are full-time on staff at the Hub. They're not raking in the money, man. Right? But they love the Lord, and they have been called to serve those in poverty. And I just love that about them and their commitment. But that is not what we all have been called to do. Some are just called to go down there and volunteer, right? Then there are others who are better suited to have, jobs that make a lot of money and give to the people who don't have. For those of you who don't, we lived in Uganda and served as missionaries for a few years. And so I always, when I talk about this, tell people that we need people here in America actually making some money so that people can go and do things. My sister, for example, when we asked her to support us, monthly while we were in Uganda, she was like, yeah, how much do you need for me not to have to go, right? Because she wasn't kidding. I mean, she was our biggest donor, and she was not about to come over and visit. She didn't want anything to do with it. As every time we would tell her stories about things, especially the road, she's just so paranoid. She'll sit with her little fingers in her ears. She's so scared. And we would tell her stories about driving, and she was like, We would have to give her a Valium at the airport, drive to where we were, and she would never leave. She would just have to sit there. She would be so scared. But hey, make that money and send it so that those of us who can go and want to go can do that, right? So there's a place for everybody, and it doesn't matter how you are serving or how you are using your gifts, as long as you are using them, because we've all been given a unique set of gifts. We've all been given a unique calling. We've all been given unique responsibilities that are really going to influence the way that we are fulfilling this mandate to serve. Next thing is we are his ambassadors wherever we go and whenever we go. And this wherever and whenever, there's not a moment that is like an exception, right? I have heard people say, that they don't want to put a Jesus fish on the back of their car because they drive with a lot of road rage, right? And they don't want anybody judging them. That's not it, guys. That's not what we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be, now, are we all going to do this well? No, we're going to fail and we're going to mess up. But we have to feel like we're wearing that Jesus fish or some little sign all the time. People are watching us. How are we using our gifts to show the world who he is? So this is my question. Are you living a questionable life? Are you living in a way that is so different from the rest of the world that people are asking questions about, why are you doing that? Okay, if you're not getting that question, if you're not getting weird looks every now and then, you might be missing something, right? Because many times we aren't doing the things that we are doing to get attention, but we're just doing what we do, right? And then we get these weird looks or start weird conversations because the world is watching us. And they want to know, what? That was weird, guys. Why'd you do that? For example, one of the things that I do, I'm walking around downtown Shreveport by myself all the time. And one of my sister's friends works down there in finance and kept seeing me walking around downtown by myself all the time. And he was very, very concerned for my sanity probably and safety, and went to my sister and was like, hey, what is it that your sister does? I see her walking around downtown Shreveport by herself all the time. And he was like, we don't go anywhere by ourselves when we're downtown. And he was like, well, she trying to explain the work that I do with the Hub, and that's just where I am all the time. And it provided me the opportunity the next time I saw him to be like, hey, I heard that you had some questions about why I'm walking around downtown Shreveport by myself all the time. And I was able to talk to him about the work. He had never heard of the Hub. He had never heard of the work that we're doing. He had, never spoken to any of the homeless people. And I was able to share with him why I'm down there and why I think that's important and why that is part of my heart and the work that I do. And that's what we're supposed to do, right? Just something that was just normal to me. Somebody saw and they thought it was different, maybe a little crazy. and they had questions about it, and then I was able to share with them. And again, not a big thing. And if you think about it, you probably have a lot of these moments in your life. Maybe you were really nice to someone that everybody else is being mean to, right? Maybe you invited that person in to sit with you. If you think about it, you're probably doing this. But if you're not, I would encourage you to take steps to do things that is going to make the world be like, wait, why are you doing that? That doesn't make any sense, okay? How many of you grew up hearing the saying, preach the gospel always, when necessary, use words? Right? I don't know about y'all, but I often use that as an excuse to not have to tell people about Jesus. Is that just me? Are y'all all like really holy? Because I was like, well, I'm not doing anything bad. So, I mean, that's how I'm different, because I'm not, doing these bad things. I'm not talking this way. So I don't have to tell you about Jesus because I'm showing you with my life. No, y'all are all making me feel like I'm a terrible person. I appreciate it. It's not just me. Okay. This isn't the thing. And if we look at the life of Jesus as our model, this wasn't how he operated either. So it can't be okay for us to do that. Should we be living a life that is questionable? Yes, right? But we also have to use words. If you think about it, how useless would it have been if Jesus had only used words and not deeds to declare the kingdom, or vice versa? He preached the good news of the kingdom, and he showed the good news of the kingdom, right? It's this both and. It's got to be both. When people look at the church, they should see the very embodiment of Jesus, right? And we can't say, well, on most days, I really love Jesus and I'm doing good, but today, I'm not, right? I love this quote from a guy named Pastor Lee Beach. He says, Peter's instruction to the church is that faithful evangelistic witness comes in the form of the simple daily obedience of Christian living together in authentic community and going into their world as ambassadors for Christ. So you see that process there, that daily obedience, and then authentic community, and then going into their world as ambassadors. Like that's the call. That's really that up in and out that we talk about as a church all the time, is in that statement. So what does it look like for us to be ambassadors for Christ? Our lives have to look different, right? We can't look like the rest of the world. If you're living a godly life, the world is going to wonder what in the world you're doing half the time, right? Okay, if you're not bashing people on Facebook, people are like, what's wrong with you? If you're being kind to the person that looks different than you, people are going to wonder. They're going to have questions. Our countercultural actions will be intriguing to those around us. If we are hanging out with people that look different or a different economic level than us, then people are going to notice that, right? People are going to have questions. How'd that happen? How'd you become friends? Ambassadors of Christ are socially adventurous. They're not hanging out with people that look just like them and act just like them and have all the same, preferences them. They are like mixing and mingling with different people. And ambassadors of Christ are full of joy, and they bring a joyous presence in the life of others. Now, remember, there's a difference between joy and happiness, right? It doesn't mean you have to be happy all the time, but like you have this deep joy, maybe even in a deep sadness, that you can still speak with deep joy, right? That's what makes us different. All right, so I want to give you 3 practical steps before we discuss some of this. So what would it look like for you to look at like an ambassador for Christ this week? The first step I would encourage you to take is to set aside time this week out of your schedule to just sit and listen to the voice of God, okay? None of the rest of it matters if we're not sitting and listening to the voice of God. And so, one of the things Luke has reminded us of the past 2 weeks is about how much Satan can get a hold of our thoughts, right? And if we're not sitting and listening to the voice of God, the voice of the enemy can become much louder than God's voice. And fear and laziness are mission killers, right? If you listen to the voice of the enemy more than the voice of God, you're going to live in fear, and you're not going to go to hard places and do hard things. Or you're going to get really lazy and complacent and be like, I don't want to talk to that person. I don't want to serve in kids. I don't want to do that. And so we have to make sure that we're listening to the voice of God. The second thing is to spend at least one time period this week learning something new about Christ. And then I would encourage you to tell a friend what it is that you learned. So it's not just you. You're not just keeping it together, just to you. You're like, oh, I read this week and I learned this new thing about Christ, and I just want you to know. And then the third thing is I would encourage you to bless 3 people this week. And I would really encourage you for one of those people to not be someone in our church, right? That you find someone that, you can bless this week. If you, really think about this, it just might be words of affirmation. It might just be, some kind of verbal support that you can communicate in love, a little note of encouragement, something like that. It might be a gift if it's somebody that you know. I would encourage you that when it comes to blessing other people, that you're observant of them, you kind of know who they are and what they want, because some people, they really love to receive gifts. Other people receiving gifts makes them really uncomfortable, right? So you've got to make sure you're loving them well. Some people you give words of encouragement and it just lights up their soul, and other people are like, what you want? So you have to make sure that when you are blessing other people, that you really know who they are and what it is that is a blessing to them, instead of assuming that they would like the same things as you. But that's the biggest thing. Sit and listen to the Lord's voice. Try to learn something new about the Lord this week, and try to bless 3 people. That would be my encouragement for serving this week. Anything? Anybody want to say? Okay. So some discussion questions that we have for you at your tables are there. And you've got, about 10 or so minutes to talk through those things. All right, proceed.